I never thought the people I loved the most would be the ones to hurt my child. But they did, and the pain it caused was something I never imagined facing. My parents, the very ones who raised me, who I believed would be the best grandparents, betrayed my trust in a way that left a scar on my family. But in the end, they learned their lesson, though it came at a cost none of us will ever forget. Stay with me, because this story is one that will shake you to your core. When my son, Liam, was born, I felt like my life had reached its highest peak. He was perfect, his tiny hands wrapped around my finger, his little giggles that could brighten the darkest day. As a first-time parent, I was overwhelmed, not just by love, but by the responsibility of keeping him safe. And I believed, without a doubt, that my own parents, Liam's grandparents, would feel the same way. At first they did. My mother would visit often, holding Liam close and whispering sweet lullabies like she did when I was a child. My father, always the quiet one, would sit nearby, watching with a smile that spoke more than words. It felt perfect, like a family in harmony. But then things started to change, slowly at first, subtle comments that I brushed off. "Oh, you're too soft on him," my mother would say. "You need to toughen him up." I would laugh it off, assuming she was just reminiscing about how she raised me. But then my father chimed in, agreeing that kids these days need discipline, not coddling. Discipline. That was the word that started it all. One evening, I left Liam with my parents for a few hours while my husband and I went out for dinner. It was meant to be a simple evening, a chance for us to breathe after months of sleepless nights. When we returned, Liam was asleep, but something felt off. He was too still, his face buried deep in his blanket. My mother smiled as she assured me he was just exhausted from learning boundaries. The next day I noticed the bruise, small, barely visible, but there, right on Liam's tiny arm. My heart pounded. I asked my mother about it, my voice shaking. She waved it off. He was being fussy. We just gave him a little tap to calm him down. A little tap? My stomach turned. My baby, my sweet innocent boy, had been hurt by the very people I trusted most. I felt a storm raging inside me, confusion, anger, betrayal, but I tried to stay calm. I wanted to believe it was a one-time mistake, that they would never actually harm him. But it wasn't just once. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing more. The way Liam flinched when my father reached for him, how he would cry hysterically when I tried to leave him alone with them. Then one evening, as I picked him up from their house, I overheard it. "Stop crying. You need to toughen up." And then a sharp cry, my son's cry, a sound I had never heard before, one of fear, not hunger or discomfort. I ran inside, my chest tightening. My father stood over Liam, his hand still in the air. And my son, my precious little boy, had tears streaming down his face, his tiny body trembling. Something inside me snapped. I grabbed Liam and held him close, his sobs muffled against my shoulder. "What are you doing?" I demanded, my voice shaking. My father looked annoyed. Teaching him. Teaching him? Teaching him what? That fear is love. That pain is discipline. That the people who are supposed to protect him are the ones who hurt him? I couldn't breathe. My own parents, the ones who raised me, had become strangers before my eyes. That night, I made a decision that shattered me, but one that I knew I had to make. I told my parents they were no longer allowed to see Liam, not until they understood, not until they learned that what they were doing wasn't love, it was harm. They were furious. My mother cried, calling me ungrateful. My father scoffed, saying I was raising a weak child. But I stood firm, because my job wasn't to please them. My job was to protect my son. For weeks there was silence. No calls, no texts, just an empty space where my parents used to be. And it hurt. Oh, it hurt. But not as much as the thought of my son being afraid in his own family. Then one day my mother called. Her voice was quieter. She asked to meet, just to talk. I hesitated but agreed. When we met, she looked older. Her eyes filled with something I hadn't seen before. Regret. She told me she had been reflecting. That maybe, just maybe, the way she was raised wasn't the only way. That she missed Liam. That she wanted to change. I wanted to believe her. But trust isn't rebuilt overnight. I told her things would have to be different, that if she truly wanted to be in Liam's life, she would have to learn. Learn that love isn't fear. Learn that discipline isn't pain. Learn that times change, and so must we. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks. My father took longer to understand, but over time they did. And while scars remain, we're healing together, because love should never hurt, and family should never be a place of fear. If you've ever been in a situation where family traditions clash with your values as a parent, you're not alone. Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Your voice matters, and together we can break cycles of harm and build better futures for our children. Thank you for listening to my story.